it's Reija and welcome to another video. Today I will be sharing with you my November reading wrap-up, and I have to say I'm very proud of myself. I'm pleased. I managed to read a total of 5 things, so I am happy. It is a good feeling. And without further ado, let's get started. I will talk about the books I read in the order of rating, so from least favorite to favorite, but I will start with a graphic novel that I read, and from there on out all the novels will be ranked from lowest rating to the best rating. First up, I will talk about Genderqueer by Maja Kobabe. This is a memoir, and it is what it says in the title. It is about your experience, about growing up and living life and figuring out it was gender queer all along. And I have to say that I can't really fully rate this on content because it is a memoir. It is very personal to M as a person. So I will instead be rating it on my own enjoyment and what I gained out of it, not on the content itself. Though I will say the art style isn't my favorite. This kind of what I like to call the Cal art potato art style is very indicative of that, of people who have gone to that school. Very many artists who have graduated from that school tend to have this art style, and it isn't bad. Don't get me wrong, it isn't bad, but I just find it interesting. Like most art schools, their teachers tend to kind of push for a certain style. It happens all the time. It happens in fashion school, for example, too. But I digress. Anyway, what I gained out of this was a feeling of connectedness and a feeling of understanding. I gained a lot of understanding for myself, and also sort of I don't know how to describe it. I could relate to a lot of Maja Kobabe's experiences, especially her experiences and talks about visiting a gynecologist, periods, etc. I demonstrably have had those same feelings and that same sort of malcontent, and it wasn't just that. There were so many things that I was just like, yeah, that's me, and I think that's very valuable. And yeah, I can't say much more than that. I just if you are someone who is sort of on the path of questioning themselves and their identity, and you're sort of looking for some guidance and looking for people with similar experiences, give this one a go. I will say that it ends really abruptly, and it's sort of it isn't a full cohesive narrative. It's sort of fluctuates and flows, and is sort of told in these vignettes. So on a personal enjoyment, knowledge gained rating aspect, I would give it 4.5 stars. But on a memoir level, unmatched. Obviously, it's a memoir. It is about Maja Kobabe's own life and experiences, so that is something that I cannot rate. So yeah, that was my experience with Genderqueer by Maja Kobabe. Then I read We Were 8 Years in Power by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I buddy read this with Shannon from That's So Po. I will leave her channel link down below. This was a hard book to read. First of all, don't schedule a buddy read of a book examining US democracy on the week of US presidential elections. It was stressful, it was pretty much a nightmare, but me and Shannon, we persevered. At this stage, I feel like Ta-Nehisi Coates is he's a great writer. These essays are written powerfully and use language in a way that is incredibly inspiring, especially as someone who is a second language English speaker. Reading and listening to Ta-Nehisi Coates' words and essays, that is something that inspires me because it gives me a sort of lens to another kind of way of using English. It's hard to describe. I just feel like Ta-Nehisi Coates' way of writing non-fiction and factual pieces is very lyrical and poetic. I find it incredibly soothing to read and to listen to. But at the same time, the topics themselves are they're rough on the soul, because he writes about so many various injustices, mass incarceration, gentrification, the value systems between how United States values certain types of people and how marginalized groups tend to have to work a lot harder to gain the same amount of validation and appreciation for things as their white counterparts. So, and also this was, We Were 8 Years in Power is obviously a critique and a sort of review of American society during the 8 years of Barack Obama's presidency. So, I thought it was very poignant to read it at this time, but at the same time it was maybe I bit a little bit too much than I could chew. I will say though, a lot of topics discussed in this book are something that I have already read about. For example, in Carol Anderson's White Rage, talked a lot about these topics. I've watched plenty of documentaries. I have more than the 101 type of knowledge of a lot of these issues that were talked about in this book. So at times it felt to me like I wasn't gaining any new insights. This isn't the fault of the book, by the way. I'm just telling you that if you are planning to pick this book up, I would suggest that if you are someone who has already immersed themselves in these topics, I'm just giving you a heads up that this book may not give you a lot of new information. So I would say that this would work very well as an introduction to these topics for someone who may want to know more about these issues, but hasn't read a lot about them yet. So this would be a very good primer. I gave this book 4 stars. I thought it was very good, and the audio especially I think was very well narrated, and yeah. And then I read Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. And, oh boy, I first heard about this book from Adri from Perpetual Pages. I will leave their channel linked down below as well. And Adri has basically been a one-person hype train for this book ever since the arc was first sent out to people, and I have been following this book's journey from that moment on. I made library purchase requests. I'm also thinking of getting my own copy now after I have read it. which also goes to show you how much I enjoyed it. What can I say? This book was just fun. And it's interesting because it is also a book that deals with very heavy topics. You know, living as an out transgender person in a community that tries to accept you but doesn't really have the tools or understanding of how to do that, and may inadvertently hurt you in the process. And coming to terms with that, and also fighting against that, fighting for your place and fighting to challenge those cultural norms. It also talks about the effects of colonialism, of like generations of like immigrants coming to the United States, and this kind of melding of cultures. And it talks about community and friendship, family. And it also has a very sweet and lovely romance in it. So this book just made me happy. Like, how can I even talk about this? Okay, so bare bones plot. I think if you have been on any corner of BookTube or Bookstagram or whatever, you have heard the plot mentioned. This book is the tale of Yadriel. He is a trans boy who wants to prove to everyone that he is a brujo. He lives in a community where roles of men and women are very like segregated into certain things. Like brujas do certain things and brujos do certain things, and there's this very sort of gendered way in which the magical powers of this community of brujas and of this community of brujex works. And Yadriel wants to prove to everyone that he is a brujo, and in order to do that, he goes through with the ceremony his kin says with the help of his cousin Maritza, who is like Maritza is Bay, and he goes through with his kin says, and then summons a spirit to try to figure out what happened to his cousin, but in order, but doing that, he summons the wrong spirit, and shenanigans ensue, and it was great. Are there problems with it? Yes, it is a debut novel. There is some pacing issues. There was some repetition in the beginning of things that I felt that wasn't strictly necessary to always go through the like plot points up to that point, but at the same time, I didn't really mind. I called the ending from a mile away, but you know, it was more about the journey. Sure, I had personal issues with it that are basically more like, to me, problems, not problems on a grand scale. I don't think that, like, for example, like, I know I'm sputtering, but for example, if you are not, if you are inclined to dislike a trope or a story vehicle or a certain way that the story is told to you, then you are inclined to dislike those aspects in a book if those are not your cup of tea. And I think the elements which I disliked in this book fell into that category. They were, to me, problems, not problems of actual like writing, you know? So yeah, I gave this 4 stars, highly enjoyed it, basically inhaled it in like 2 days, and yeah, I would recommend it. Yeah, I mean, just I will happily read more things from Aidan Thomas in the future. The next thing that I finished was Hollowpox, The Hunt for Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend, and this is the 3rd installment in the Nevermore series, which tells the story of Morrigan Crow, who was born as a cursed child, and on the eve of her like 11th birthday, she gets smuggled out of her country into this basically a sort of country, but also alternative dimension, a magical place called Nevermore, and she is then tasked to finish these trials to gain entry into a wondrous society. And everything goes from there, and I really like this book series. It has a lot of things going for it. It has a subversion of the Chosen One trope. It has a kind of like subversion of Fall from Grace and Fall to Darkside tropes, which, like, this book makes you think, or rather, this book series makes you think that it is about one thing, and then proceeds to do things differently from the way that you initially expected, and I have loved that about pretty much every single installment. The first one didn't do that too much, but Wondersmith and now Hollowpox have definitely leaned into that particular aspect, and that is what I most enjoy about this series, so I am here for the ride. Sorry if you can hear noise in the background, by the way. It's Mospet. He is being Mospet. And yeah, this book takes place on the third year when Morrigan has come to Nevermore, and it is about her adventures during the third year, and it is about her education, and also this mysterious plague that is basically only targeting the magical animals of this society, and because of that, I felt that at times this book was a little hard to read because, you know, talk of curfews, lockdowns, and people getting sick, no one knowing what's happening. You know, it's a lot at this stage during this time, so bear that in mind if you read this. But at the same time, it's I found that the things that I liked about it most were the world building elements. It feels like the world is getting more detailed and more fleshed out. Unfortunately, my biggest gripe with this book is that the characters are not getting fleshed out at the same rate as the world is. The main three characters of I'd say Morrigan, Jupiter, and the main sort of series antagonist are developed very well, especially in this book. But unfortunately, Jessica Townsend has created this huge roster of characters, and none of those side characters is getting enough love and attention, and they are sort of competing for space, which means that none of them really get to shine. And you know, that's my biggest gripe with the series as a whole. Like, the main characters have a very good rapport and banter, and like they are being developed very well, but the supporting cast, not so much, and it's sort of like the sticking point for me with the series. But the story, world building, the whimsical atmosphere, and the themes are very good. This book, I would say that the main themes actually in this particular book is not the plague, it's about information war. It's basically themes of who controls the narrative, has the like power over people. It's about misinformation, disinformation, like sort of like having good PR and controlling the news flow, etc. That's the main theme, and I think it's actually handled really well. And it's handled in a way that is easy for the target demographic of this book to understand, but not like not overly simplified. It's still quite complex. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I was talking to friends the other day during the latest Stitch and Bitch on Rachel's channel about how I thought that unless the ending did something really spectacular, this would be my second favorite Nevermore book after Wundersmith. But the ending of this book was so ridiculously well done that I think that now this is actually my favorite Nevermore book. So yeah, I gave this 4.5 star. Really good. We'll continue on with the series. Highly anticipating the next one. Yeah, I'm loving this series. And then finally, what could be my favorite book of November? Drumroll please. It is Elatsoe by Darcy Littlebadger. I friggin' loved this book. It is magical. It is timely. It is a commentary, but it is an adventure. It is dark, but it is also funny. It's just... like, is it perfect? No. But those perceived faults that I have with it didn't impede with my overall enjoyment of the book. This book is a story about a Lipan Apache girl, Elatsoe, Ellie, and her basically trying to figure out the culprit behind the murder of her cousin. And she can summon ghost animals to serve as her companions and helpers, and she is on the page asexual, and she has a very supportive and connected family that helps her throughout, and also a very tightly knit friend group. And yeah, this was great. Humor on point, world building on point. Like, I don't really know what to tell you other than to read it. This has one of the best explorations of vampiric lore I have ever seen. I loved that the oral tradition of passing down information from one generation to the next is a through-line theme throughout this entire book, and the story of Ellie's 6th grade grandmother is told in pictures, in chapter headers, and those illustrations work as their own individual narrative, even without the story, and it's brilliant. Yeah, this is just great. Like, I mean, this book has deckled edges, and I detest deckled edges. But I loved it so much that despite my loathing of deckled edges, I want my own copy, because this was great. And I will even learn to love deckled edges for it. And I don't know what I'm saying. And, like, are you even coming to my channel anymore for, like, in-depth analysis? Because, like, I can't, like... This was delightful. This was fun. Also, the ease of which technology is used throughout this book. Ellie and her friend are live streaming things, gathering evidence, taking video, recording discussions, and using technology in ways in which people actually use them in real life. Like, they have cell phones and they are actually using them, and they are using GPS, and they are like using all the various tools in their disposal that they can to solve this mystery, and it was great. But also all of the lore and all of the like old myths and ways in which like the fantastical elements are brought into the fore in this book were great. And like this book was just amazing. 5 stars. I loved it. I loved practically every bit of it. And go read it, please. My favorite book of November, possibly one of my favorite books of the whole year. So I'm sorry I can't give you more coherent thoughts, but... And there you have it. Those were all of the books that I read in the month of November. If you have read any of these books, tell me in the comments, what did you think of them? Are you planning to read any of them? Let me know. And in honor of Elatsoe and Ghost Dogs, please leave me a dog or ghost emoji down in the comments. And let's chat in the comments. And I hope you are having a wonderful day. And yeah, I'll see you in another video very soon. Bye bye!